Yo, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Renegade Roundtable podcast, a special edition of the Renegade Roundtable podcast. As always, I'm Jeffrey Kirby, and as always, we are joined by Jared, who I think Jared has himself muted with a new look. He decided to go cue ball on us and completely shave his head.
Looks sexy. Don't worry about it.
Jared, you have yourself muted, by the way. I don't think he realized it. There he goes.
No, I did, but I really appreciate it. It was, just had to be done.
Yeah, I saw that and I was like, oh boy, here we go. And as always, we are joined back. We've seen him on the show before. Joe from Draft Nation, Joe 412. Joe, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me back. Looking forward to our conversation today.
And obviously, you've heard me talk about it, and we'll mention it again. 2 weeks from today, the NFL draft. We will be doing the Draft Nation draft show. I will be a part of the Draft Nation draft show over at the Rivers Casino. Make sure to go and get your tickets. There's a link when you go to draftnation.com. There'll be a spot where it'll say draft party. You could go in there, get your tickets. Make sure to go and see us. It was a blast last year at Stage AE, and I know it's going to be an even bigger blast this year at the Rivers Casino, and it's going to be an absolute ball. So hope to see you guys there. And Joe, before we get started, I'll kind of let you, for those that have never seen us before or seen you before on the show, kind of talk about what you do and where they could get your content.
Yeah, sure. So, we are Draft Nation. Draftnation.com will take you to our website. And Draft Nation is a national e-magazine that focuses on all four professional sports and their team building. So things like mock drafts like we're doing today, or free agency, or things like salary cap provision, and of course, trading deadlines, anything that's going to affect the makeup of your teams, whether it's minor leagues or stars that you've just drafted in this upcoming draft in 2 weeks, what that means for your teams going forward and what that might mean for your teams immediately. So, check us out, and we cover all four sports. And of course, the crown jewel and all of that's the NFL draft. So we're in that 2 week countdown starting this afternoon.
Good stuff. And obviously you guys have seen me. I've posted a couple mock drafts on there as well. And speaking of mock drafts, next Thursday, we will be doing our mock draft 3.0 show. For everyone else that'll be on, it'll be their 2.0. It'll be my mock draft 3.0. And, of course, that's also going to get uploaded onto draftnation.com. So make sure to go and check that out. And I'll have to do another one because I have a bet with one of my coworkers that we're going to do a mock draft the day of the draft. And whoever gets the most right, whoever loses, I think, has to buy dinner. So I got to make sure I'm really on top of that. I want a good dinner. Give me a nice ribeye. But speaking of, let's get into things, because we did this last year with Joe, and we kind of talked, and we knew what was going to be going on with the first overall pick. We knew it was going to be Caleb Williams. This year, it's not so much of a conclusion on what it's going to be at the first overall pick. I mean, there's still the conversation of, is it going to be Cam Ward, which is starting to lean towards that. Is it going to be is there still the slight chance that Travis Hunter could go number one? Is it going to be Abdul Carter? There's a multitude of conversations that are being going on with that number one overall pick, and what should they do? And I'll kind of let this, Joe, I'll let you start off here. I know we've talked about this when I was on the Draft Nation podcast about a month ago, and I said that I thought it should be Abdul Carter. Do you agree with that still, or are you maybe leaning towards it should be Cam Ward?
Well, I think that this quarterback class is remarkably weak, and Cam Ward heads a class that, if you were to even compare it to last year's class, this is a guy that could have gone 5th in the quarterback class, 7th in the quarterback class. And here we are today talking about him going 1st overall to the Tennessee Titans and being their franchise quarterback. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, if people could make the argument that if Cam Ward was in last year's class, he would still be a top 10 pick. I get it, and Tennessee needs it. They've kind of given up on Will Levis, and it looks like, by all indications, the team is leaning in that direction. I think that to your point about Abdul Carter, and I'll even throw Travis Hunter into the conversation since you mentioned it, Hunter and Carter are exceptional talents, perhaps generational talents. We've not seen the likes of Travis Hunter since maybe Deion Sanders, where he could play two sports. He played a number of positions, or a Bo Jackson, being able to play, baseball and football. This is a guy that could have played any sport anywhere at any time and been successful and been cream of the crop. And I think that he's probably the safest pick in this draft in that respect, especially if you're drafting number one. You don't want to miss that. But ultimately, this game is decided by quarterbacks. And even though Travis Hunter can play two positions at corner and wide receiver, and will likely do so in some capacity in the NFL, and Abdul Carter might be one of the best defensive prospects to come out in the last 5 years. His get off is amazing. His quicks are incredible. You watch him in game film. You watch him at practice. He had limited stuff that he could do at the combine, but ultimately this guy is quick, and it's what you need at his position at edge in the pros. And that's why I think he's been bandied about as a number one pick overall. I think he's got the chops to do it. And this year you've got two of those guys, right? The third in this case is going to be Cam Ward. And of the three, I think Cam Ward is the one that's the less sexy of the group. That said, he's the one that's most necessary. And so that's why I think he'll go number one overall to the Titans.
Jared, I'll let you add on to that.
No, I agree. I think Cam Ward will most likely go number one. It's just, I think the draft starts at the second pick as the days get closer to the draft. Is the Browns going to draft a quarterback at 2, or are they going to go with Hunter or Abdul Carter? Is my question. Is what the Browns are going to do next, and that would lean towards what the Giants would do with whoever's left.
I would say when it comes to the Browns, because obviously I live in Cleveland, I hear about what's going on. I hear the conversations that are going on. And by all indications, I'm making the prediction now that the Browns will take Travis Hunter at number 2. Now, here's the conversation about what they're going to do. Now, if Abdul Carter is there, to me, I think that should be the pick. Now, am I going to, if you're looking at it from an analyst standpoint, not from the personal hatred standpoint, but from an analyst standpoint, am I going to get mad at the Browns if they take Travis Hunter? Absolutely not, because it's a guy, like Joe mentioned, it's a guy that can do, he could do a multitude of things. He could play the corner very well. He could play wide receiver very well. We're going to get to that conversation here in 1 second. But imagine having a pass rush duo of Myles Garrett and an Abdul Carter where the upside is through the roof. Imagine being able to learn from someone like a Myles Garrett, who is arguably the best or the second best pass rusher in the NFL, however you want to go with that. And Abdul Carter, he's very raw at the position. We've talked about this numerous of times. But the fact that he has the speed and the get-off that he has, and the way that he's versatile, the way that he can bend, I think Jim Schwartz would love that in his defense. But you get to Travis Hunter, where I ultimately do think they're going to go with, do you play him at corner or do you play him at wide receiver? And I was just having this conversation earlier today with a friend of mine, shout out to Hunter. And I said, what was it? Someone had asked, what position is he going to play? And I said, I would think corner and then get him snaps on offense. And then I said that I think it'd be easier to play corner and then get him snaps on offense. You could create some sort of package for him. And my friend rebutted and said he actually thinks it'd be easier for him to play wide receiver based on the corner room. I just said, I think it would be easier on Travis Hunter to let him learn defense and then put packages for him to get him, maybe start off with 10 to 15 snaps on offense and gradually let that go a little, or even maybe 15 to 20 snaps on offense. And then just kind of let that gradually grow as he learns the NFL, as he becomes more comfortable within being an NFL player. So I think that ultimately, that would be very beneficial for them.
Yeah, I think that I have a tendency to agree. I think Travis Hunter is probably the best football player in the class. He has more than likely some of the most unique skill sets we've seen since some of the names I mentioned earlier. And I think that the Browns, that is a problem, right? The Browns have a stacked corner room. There was some chatter early on during the combine time that Denzel Ward might be moved. But ultimately, with this pick, I mean, the guy can play both sides of the ball. And even prior to the combine, both the Browns head coach and GM mentioned that they saw him more on the wide receiver side. Now, that's different than most NFL teams, where most have seen him, slotting in at corner. These kind of talents are really, they're harder to get at corner than they are at wide receiver. And I think that, that's why you hear a lot of GMs and coaches saying this guy's going to play corner in the league, because those are valued positions. Those are the blue chip picks, the quarterbacks, the cornerbacks, the edge rushers, and the left tackles. Those are the ones we hear about all the time. And sometimes you can even reach, like we're doing this year with Cam Ward at Tennessee just 5 minutes ago. This is a guy that, will come in. And I think that corner position is something you can lock down, but where do they play him is the question. Now, it's easy to say you play him wherever, and then you do get a 15 or 20 play package for him every week and let him grow from there. But this is a guy who could literally play both ways. And I too agree. I think the Browns go in this direction. The only reason I don't think they take Abdul Carter is because they do have Myles Garrett. It's unnecessary, even though it would be a menace of a defense. And I also see this as a position where, a Chicago might make an aggressive move, make a deal that the Cleveland Browns can't refuse, and move up here to grab Abdul Carter so he doesn't slip to the Giants at 3. And as a result, the Browns might have more to think about on draft day, or maybe they're already thinking about it as we talk. I mean, there's a lot of chatter about Chicago maybe making that kind of bold move. So I think it's Hunter, but it could also be a trade out. And if it's Abdul Carter, watch out, AFC North.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think part of the reason why you could say, hey, you can go either way too. You look at their defensive rankings last year, and let's not forget too, in 2023, that Jim Schwartz ran defense was phenomenal. They were cream of the crop in a lot of categories, and there was a huge drop off last year. I know they had some injuries, but you look at 27th in points allowed. They were dead last in yards per pass. They were middle of the road in sacks. They were dead last in interceptions. So they definitely need help on defense, whether you wanted to help them on the back end or you help them as in the on the front four, whatever way, it's going to benefit them in the absolute long run as well. But I want to kind of move on to, and Jared, you mentioned this a little bit too, and talked about the trade too, is the Giants at number 3. The Giants, now they're in a weird spot, because do you say, are they still in this quarterback conversation? Are they out of the quarterback conversation? If they're in, then the Shedeur Sanders, which that whole conversation is becoming weird about him potentially falling off a little bit now. And then Jackson Dart, he's been someone that's been starting to rise a little bit. Where do they go with that? And if you say they're out, okay, they'll look at some of their needs that they would have. They still obviously, I mean, you could say that quarterback is still a need because let's be honest, their quarterback room, you got Russell Wilson, 1-year deal, and Jameis Winston's on a 2-year, $8 million deal. That's not forever. So their quarterback, you don't have that future yet at quarterback. And then you could also say maybe they need a defensive tackle, but I don't think there's a defensive tackle unless, could they shock us to go with Mason Graham? Could that be a conversation that could be had? I also think maybe an interior offensive line would be helpful because there's no one there at value at number 3. So it's an interesting conversation of what the Giants might do.
Yeah, I think that I agree. I think that the Giants are in a really interesting spot. They too are a candidate for a trade out. This is something, if Chicago can't get to 2 and Abdul Carter slips to them, they've had him in twice already for meetings, and I think they like him, or at least they're showing that they like him. They didn't solve their quarterback problem, but I don't think the quarterback problem is going to be solved in this draft for anybody save for Tennessee. I think Ward could be a day one starter. He's got the chops to be a starter. I think everybody else, slots in at a second round value. It's strange because we sit here and a lot of folks in our business sit here and we have mock drafts and we list people 1 to 32. That doesn't happen in scouting rooms or in the NFL, war rooms. They rank players based on, the round in which they think they should go. And this year's quarterback class, save for Cam Ward, are second round guys and beyond. So you're really overdrafting a player like Shedeur Sanders at 3, at 10, at 21, which I know we'll talk about a little later. But that's okay. I mean, these are premium positions and people will take a reach. The Steelers did that a few years ago with Kenny Pickett. He hasn't panned out. Maybe he does in Cleveland. Who knows? We'll see. But this is a year that Jim Schoens and company can't screw up. And I think that's why they went out and got Russell Wilson to buy some time. And if they take one of these guys, whether it's staying at 3 and using it on Shedeur Sanders or trading down and getting Shedeur later or Jackson Dart later, they have someone behind them that they can groom, right? There's someone in front of them, I should say, that can groom them and buy them a year or two until they're ready to be starters. And that's not saying that, a second round pick or a second round valued pick in the eyes of the NFL scouting world can't be, a world-class player. I mean, we've seen plenty of number 2s, go to the Hall of Fame. And I can name 10 of them off the top of my head, including a guy that used to play in San Diego and then down in New Orleans. But the concept here is, I think that Abdul Carter is a can't miss. If he's there, it's going to be really, really hard for them to pass on him, where the rest of these guys they can get later. And also keep in mind, teams like Cleveland, like the Giants, like others that also draft at the top of round 2 might be able to reach back up and grab one of these guys that do slip later in the draft and target at 24 or 26, trade back up into the first round, giving up that second round pick and other treasures to go along with that at draft capital to then grab that same guy. And they don't have to take them at number 3. I mean, Cleveland did that a number of years ago with Johnny Manziel. They waited and waited and waited, and then boom, they jumped up and got him later. And that gives them that 5th year option, which teams are going to want with a quarterback. Instead of waiting for him to get to year 2, and that 5th year option could be critical. And that's why I think, even though the Giants need a quarterback, I don't know, this is the year to get one, and maybe they can do some crafty legerdemain on the day of the draft and still get one and later in round 1 and not miss on an Abdul Carter.
It's going to be interesting. I was letting Jared buy some time for a second while he was taking a drink.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know what they're gonna do. It's just they have 2 quarterbacks. I don't think they would get one. Maybe, like I said, unless they trade back up after their pick number 3. That's what I'm thinking. Maybe they would do that because, like I said, they're not long-term answers for now. Or maybe they get one next year.
Yeah, they're not. Number 4, New England. I think for the most part, we kind of understand what they're going to do. I think most of us are going to predict they're going to probably go with Will Campbell. Mm-hmm. Joe, would you agree on that?
Yeah, I think he's the obvious choice. They need to protect their star quarterback in Drake May. Will Campbell is the cream of the crop here. I know that some folks like Armand Membu. He's been rising up many boards based on his size. And there's some questions about both Kelvin Banks and Will Campbell's arm length. And why that's important for those of you that think that might be a throwaway stat, it is. This is a game of inches, and there are guys like Joe Thomas who played with shorter arms and are going to the Hall of Fame, and so those things happen, and you can't just take the measurables for what they are. The players made up of multiple facets, but measurables are an important one of them. And so when you have shorter arms, it's easier to play inside because the responsibility of the offensive line, not to simplify things, is to protect the quarterback. And to protect the quarterback on the edges of the offensive line, you need length because you've got fast guys that are trying to get around you, fast guys that are stunting inside of you. And so for you to put that extra inch or 2 or 4, in some cases, to push a guy outside of his bend so he can't get around you to the quarterback in time before the ball is released, that's why that's so important. And so guys like Will Campbell suffer a little bit during these times when their measurables keep them 2 inches shorter on their arm length than they should be, with a guy that has a 30-inch arm length instead of a 34-inch arm length, where their pinky finger has to brush their knee, things like that. Goofy stuff that you see at combines and pro days that are insane. But Will Campbell is clearly the cream of the crop, and I think he's going to be fine at left tackle. If they need to move him inside, I think he's a Pro Bowler inside, but I think he honestly can stick at left tackle and be a really good starter, if not a Pro Bowler for them, and really help shore up that line for Drake May.
Yeah, I was going to say, me and Jared have had this conversation. I think we've both kind of just said, this is probably going to be the pick, and
pretty much, unless Travis Hunter falls to 4, which I don't see that happening. that's what they would like.
Yeah, you pray for that to happen, and when it happens,
exactly.
I want to move down. I want to move down a couple picks, because the team that we're about to talk about, me and Jared have been both. Well, Jared lost the rest of his hair. About what this team's going to do, and it's the New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints are, like, sometimes I'm like, I don't know what the hell they're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And could they go with an edge rusher? Could they go with a receiver? Could they go with a defensive tackle? What could they
do?
A corner. I mean, there's a multitude of things. They kind of remind me of the mid to late 2000s at the time Oakland Raiders. We don't know what the hell they're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that my take on the Saints is they could legitimately take any position and not be embarrassed by taking that in the first round. They need everything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that maybe a Shedeur Sanders sliding here is all that bad of a pick, or a Jackson Dart if they believe in Jackson. We could talk about him specifically if you want to later too. I know we talked a little bit about Shedeur. We can get into both the measurables and the qualities of both those prospects if you want. But the Saints are they're in one of those positions where you take a receiver, you take, it doesn't matter. In my opinion, if I were the Saints, I'd go in one of two different directions. If you want to focus on the offense, Tyler Warren from Penn State, they need a tight end. They've got Olave on the outside. This guy would give them a hell of a target in the middle. He can do a lot of different things. It might be a little bit high at 9. I know the Colts and some other teams are salivating for him to fall to 17 or 14 and below. But ultimately, I think that might be the play for them there. On the defensive side, Jared, you hit it. Maybe it's a corner, maybe it's Will Johnson, maybe it's Jihad Campbell. I mean, there's a lot of guys. And in Campbell's case, he's got the versatility to be a weapon all over the place, and create mismatches. Here's a guy that plays inside and outside. He's a guy that just hasn't gotten to the pinnacle of what he's going to be as a player. And again, it might be a little high here, but I think that if the Saints chose any position on the board, everybody's just going to nod their head and say, yeah, they needed that too.
Pretty much. Okay.
Real quick, you mentioned a name on there, and I'm going to say so. Jared, I think you know where I'm about to go with this.
I think so.
I have a theory. Every year, there's usually one pick when you're doing a mock draft that you feel so confident in for whatever reason. This year, I have for an ungodly amount of confidence that Jihad Campbell will end up a Tampa Bay Buccaneer.
That's a long slide, brother.
It is. I have a big gut, and I have a gut.
But you never know. It's at the beginning, it made sense. He was, he's rising, Jihad Campbell. But
I mean, it's interesting too because you have the conversation about Jalen Walker too. There's not all that many when you're talking first round linebackers. There's not that many. I would say probably at most 2 off-ball linebackers that are going to be, first round guys would be Jalen Walker or Jihad Campbell. It's going to be one of those 2. And I don't know. I just had this gut feeling, and I've been saying this for a long time, that I just have this weird feeling.
Trust your gut. I mean, Levante David and Devin White, they've made changes there on the inside. They need it. We could talk about Tampa specifically, in a little bit if you want, but ultimately it's the right pick if it gets to them. I just don't think he's going to fall that far. Maybe your gut's telling you the right thing. They just have to move up to get him.
Very true.
Just so you know, in 2 weeks' time, if Jihad Campbell does become a Tampa Bay Buccaneer, you're going to see a reaction out of me. You're seeing a reaction out of me because I'm good. That's just because you know what it was. back in 2019, I had this weird feeling that Jerry Tillery was going to end up a Charger. I had the same feeling, and it ended up happening. And that was my first year covering the NFL draft, and I just have this weird same feeling. I don't know why, but we kind of got off track there. As you go on into the middle part of the draft, we mentioned the Colts. I think the Colts are a big team that they're really wanting. They're really wanting a tight end. Go up a couple picks. Dallas. We haven't talked about the running backs yet. Ashton Genty, we all know about him. But now the rise of Omarion Hampton. So now there's a potential for 2 running backs. I've seen a mock draft or 2 that Travion Henderson goes at in the first round. I don't know if I see that, but Dallas would definitely be a team that would be interested in one of those 2. And then you go.
I think they need a receiver more. There's another thing too. They don't have it. They just have CD. Who else is a threat to them?
I mean, and you're not wrong. I think that would be because right now their wide receiver 2 is Jalen Tolbert. So they're in the same position that the Steelers were in last year. You have a great wide receiver 1, and then we went from George Pickens to Van Jefferson. And so I think that's definitely a conversation. I think it's a 1A, 1B. It's not like a need 1, need 2. It's a 1A, 1B when it comes to they need a playmaker. We could say it like that. They need a playmaker of some sort. And then you go to, let's say, the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins, I thought for sure they were going to go with the offensive line. And then they added some pieces. They had added James Daniels because I thought they really needed a guard. And I thought that's where someone like Tyler Booker would come into play. And then they go and get James Daniels on a 3-year deal, and it's like, all right, maybe not. And then Teron Armstead retires, and you're like, okay, now that's a big need again.
Yeah, I think that if we took them in order, I mean, the Dallas Cowboys are in an interesting position, and they could overdraft at that position, assuming a Genty's off the board. I think Genty may go to the Raiders at 6. I think that's sort of the consensus. And then Hampton, do they do what the Detroit Lions did a few years ago and surprise everybody who had Gibbs ranked at the bottom of the first round, top of the second round, just based on position, not on quality of play. And that draft, we saw Detroit throw out the book, and they said, "We don't care. We're picking Jack Campbell in the first round. We're picking Jahmyr Gibbs in the front. We don't care. These are positions of need for us. We're going to fill them. These are the best guys on our board, and we don't care what the draftniks are saying, what the talking heads are saying, but we don't care." And Jahmyr Gibbs worked out well for them, right? As I think it was 11 or 12 or whatever. It was that year.
I think 12.
Yeah, for that. So, do the Cowboys do the same thing with Omarion Hampton? Say we need a running back and we're going to pick him. But this year's running back class is really deep, and you can get quality starting level running backs in rounds 2, 3, and maybe even 4. But before you get into some role players that are still interesting. And it's not the way with the receiving core this year. Travis Hunter would be at the top of anybody's receiving core, but is he going to be a receiver is the question, and he's going to be gone before Dallas chooses anyway. Yep. Is Ted McMillan going to be around? Ted McMillan is a different kind of player than CeeDee Lamb. He presents size and hands and wingspan, but he runs a 4.58, right? So you're not going to get a lot of yards after the catch, but you are going to get a monster target with a giant catch radius. And it's something that may interest them because it's a different kind of receiver than CeeDee Lamb is. So I think the Cowboys could go there, and there are late wide receiver values in second, third, and fourth rounds this year, but the stars of this are going to be there. And I think it might be more likely like a Matthew Golden or somebody of that ilk. I think that might be a little too high for Egbuka, but ultimately, I think that's where they land. The Colts, you're right. I mean, the talk is Tyler Warren, but the talk is one thing, the walk is something else. And we saw them go edge rusher last year when everybody thought they were going on the offensive side of the ball. And if Loveland or Warren are there, I think it'll be hard for them to pass up. They want to give their weak quarterback room more targets to throw to. And they've got some legit wides. They don't have a legit tight end, and Warren and Loveland both, I think, are 1 and 1A this year. So I think that could be and maybe should be the pick for the Colts. But interestingly enough, I mean, I can also see them going corner. That was a position of need for them last year. And then Juju Brents, hurt himself, was out for an extended period of time. They've got to address that too. So if the right corner is still on the board, the Will Johnsons of the world fall to them. I could see them going there as well. But we'll see. And it's hard because that's an enigmatic organization with a GM that's hard to read. So I don't know what they do there, and how they figure that out. But we'll see. And then in terms of Miami, I think Miami can go in a variety of different ways. I honestly think offensive line, defensive line. I mean, they've lost a lot on the defensive line last year and really didn't do a heck of a job filling that in. But you got an offensive-minded coach and might want someone there to protect, a Tua. And then I think this might be a place where the combine darling Nick Immanwori from South Carolina, they need a safety. And this kid jumped out of the gym. He was the best at everything he did. Was the best safety at speed. He was the best safety at vertical. He was the best safety at broad jump. He was the best safety in the drills. I mean, the guy was top shelf, and you didn't hear about him because he played for the Gamecocks. If he played for a different SEC team, you might have heard about him a little bit more. But this kid really stood out at the combine, and I think that maybe Miami goes there, but ultimately I can see offensive line here.
Okay. I want to say with the Miami thing too, because I think I agree about the safety thing, because on my my team needs, that was my number one biggest need for the Miami Dolphins. Now you could say the offensive line thing with Teron Armstead, but once they started to fill the interior part of their offensive line, I really thought that safety would be a need for them. They lost a couple safeties last year too. They lost Javon Holland. They lost Sierra Neal. So they lost a couple safeties in that secondary room, and they added Ashton Davis, but I mean, he's on a 1-year deal. That's kind of a whatever pick. They definitely need a safety of some sort. And you mentioned Nick Immanwori. I think Malachi Starks, who in my opinion reminds me of a faster, more athletic Minka. They've had that at one point in time, and well, we all know what happened to him. But Malachi Starks, to me, I really like the kid a lot. When I think that he reminds me of a faster, more athletic Minka Fitzpatrick, I think that speaks highly of how I feel about him. Where you could play him in the box, you could play him deep. He's a willing tackler. I think he has the size to be a safety in the NFL. I really like the kid a lot. And then he mentioned Nick Immanwori. I mean, what can you say about him? Yeah. What can't you say about him? And I think you look at him, reminds me a lot of Tyler Nubin. Remember last year, Tyler Nubin was a second-round pick for the Giants, stepped right in and was a pretty good safety for the Giants right away. And I think that he could be someone like that too. I just think my biggest issue with him is he needs to be a tiny bit stronger. And you can see he gets baited by play action and pump fakes at times. I think that's something he's going to have to work on is being a little bit more patient. But overall, he's a combination of a lot of things that you like in safeties in today's NFL.
Yeah, and I'd say that if Tyler Nubin played for anybody except for Minnesota, he may have been a first-round pick. There was flirting at the end of the first round for him. The Giants got him later in the in the second, but ultimately the guy, if he would have played in the SEC, or if he would have played at Ohio State or Penn State or Michigan, he was just playing, with a school that's, middle of the pack, jumps up every now and then and just didn't have the pedigree that some of the other guys had. And, again, look, Immanwori is the same way. He plays for a team that's, a little bit further down the line in as far as SEC teams go, but that combine experience and the show that he put on really kind of turned a lot of heads.
Yeah, and I think the one thing too that not a lot of people talk about too is the fact that he has versatility in terms of he played linebacker in high school, so he has that ability. I also think he could play the nickel position, so he brings that versatility, and I think that he could line up against tight ends and wide receivers in man coverage. So what else can't you ask for in a safety in today's NFL? And I think, like you mentioned with the combine, he did a lot. And let's not forget too, I know arm length doesn't matter nearly as much when it comes to safeties versus corners, but if we're talking if he could play in coverage, he has 32.5-inch arms, which is pretty damn good for a safety in the NFL. I mean, that's pretty close to what Will Campbell was.
That's longer than Will Campbell.
So there you go. There you go.
To make a point, sort of circle back, a call back there. You've got a safety that has longer arms than a guy you want to play left tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And one thing, and Jared, I think I've heard you say this. I know Herb, if he's watching, he's heard me say this before. I'm not the biggest fan of Will Campbell. I've said that going back to January. When I watched the film on him, I was not the biggest fan of him. In my opinion, and when I'm scouting, I take the team's bias out of it. Like, I don't, the Michigan Ohio State thing, whatever. Like, we'll get to the Michigan stuff here in a second, because Joe, you'll like what I'll have to say about your team, the Michigan Wolverines. But in my opinion,
what were you saying? I heard "Go Blue." Did you say "Go Blue"?
I didn't say that. But what I did say was,
it was "Hail to the Victors." I'm sorry.
Oh wait, who won the national championship this year?
Oh, here we go.
No,
lost to Michigan. There's no way around that. Still lost to Michigan.
Well, doesn't fit my agenda. But no, if there was one guy, and Herb, here you go. Herb's in here. He says "Go Blue." He's a big that team from up north fan. There was one guy that I was really a fan of when I watched his film, ironically, was Josh Simmons. I was a huge fan of what he was able to do, and he reminded me a lot of Deion Dawkins. Now, I know he and I saw, when I started watching his film, I was like, oh. No, I watched him every week, but when I was watching him specifically, I'm like, oh, I really like this kid. And take the team bias out of it. I was like, oh, he could have been playing in a Michigan uniform, and I would have said the same thing.
Yeah, if it were not for his injury, I think he would be ranked higher. I agree with you. He might be someone 3 years from now we look back and say he should have been the first tackle off the board. And that's not a slight. I think Will Campbell is going to be a very successful pro, if not an all-pro. Same, Kelvin Banks, I think ultimately he might play inside, but if they draft him as a tackle and let him try it out, or Membu's somebody that still is on the rise, right? He still has a lot of potential, unrealized potential at this point. But Simmons is somebody he will be a steal later in the draft.
Since we're talking Ohio State, Michigan, we'll get to Michigan here, because there are three players, and Michigan, I bring this on because we're going to talk about the Steelers here now, is me being an Ohio State fan, and Joe, and then, like I said, Joe, you're going to like what I got to hear, and Herb, you've heard me say this, and I know you'll like it. The two guys that I would really love to see be Pittsburgh Steelers this year are both coming from Michigan. I'd love to see either Kenneth Grant, or the value, I think, of Will Johnson is just so wild in terms of the top of where he could go versus could he, fall. If he were to somehow fall to 21, I would love to see Will Johnson at 21, or I'd love to see Kenneth Grant at 21. So me being an Ohio State guy, I am admitting that the two guys on the top of my list that I would like to see are both Michigan Wolverines.
Well, I'm glad to hear you finally admit it. Everyone could be wrong. Just come back, just come back on the right side of things. You'll be fine. And and I agree with you. I mean, Will Johnson is enigmatic, is the word I would use to describe him. I mean, people are afraid of his straight line speed, yet he has 3 touchdowns in the last 2 years returned for, or 3 pick sixes returned for touchdowns in the last two seasons. They worry about, his, all of these things about him. The guy has such a high football IQ. He breaks on him. You watch him on film, he's breaking on the ball before the ball is thrown. He knows it's coming his way, or he knows and that's why he's been able to do that. Now, sure, speed kills in the NFL, and Will's going to have to keep up with them. He's having his pro day, and it's hard to gauge a guy that had turf toe, that had as many injuries as he had in the last year. But he had such an amazing, second season, and this year, I think he, if it were, again, not for Travis Hunter's insane measurables and everything you want to talk about with Hunter, he's the top corner in this draft. Now, some people will argue it's Barron from Texas. Others may argue in a different direction. But Will Johnson only won and only did well, was never beaten. The guy, you just watch him on film. He's a player's player. And I agree. If he gets to 21 somehow, they would be foolish to pass on him. That said, their need is a defensive interior line, right? And you got a guy like Kenneth Grant that's just a run stopper. can eat up 2 spaces. You could play him at a natural nose at a zero technique. You can bounce him out to play at a variety of other techniques within the interior line. Those before him that are going to be gone. I mean, clearly Mason Graham will be gone by then, but ultimately, does a Nolan slip to the Steelers? Does, Derek Harmon slip to the Steelers? And the answers are probably not. For the Steelers, they'll likely have to jump up to, move up to get one of them. But Grant, I think, is positioned very well to be there for them. And if you rewind this a couple of years and look at Andy Weidel as a Philadelphia Eagle assistant GM and now a Steelers assistant GM, offensive line 1 year, offensive line the next year, defensive line the third year, and the Steelers are replicating that same stuff. Offensive line 2 years ago, offensive line last year, and they're going to address the defensive line. I mean, they let Ogunjobi go. Cam Hayward's 812 years old, and still playing at the top of his game, but that might not be like that forever. Yep. It's a position they haven't addressed, and it's the most obvious position. But if you've got a Will Campbell, a Shedeur Sanders that slipped that far, they might, take the bait. But, ultimately, I think this is a Kenneth Grant choice or someone like him. If Harmon's there, Nolan's there, I think those guys might also be, quality alternatives. As a Michigan guy, of course, I'd love to see him here in the Steel City. But ultimately, if Will Johnson's still on the board, I would go Johnson over Grant and pick up. There's enough defensive line, like Darius Alexander or somebody you can get in the second round. I think that's going to be there. And that's something we can also talk about, too, if you want. The Steelers don't have a second round right now. But the rumors are that George Pickens may be on his way out the door. And if he lands in a place like Las Vegas and they've got a top 6 second round pick, the Steelers might be willing to part with him for obvious reasons. And then now all of a sudden they're drafting at the top of the second round. And that makes their ability to move up and down even more interesting.
Jared, I'll let you say something real quick.
Yeah, just my one question is, if Shedeur falls or any of these, if that quarterback is at 21, do they really grab him, or is there another quarterback they like in the middle of the draft that they will go after?
Well, they had both Shedeur Sanders in today and Dart in earlier for one of their top 30 interviews. They watched them closely. I think in Dart's case, the knock on Dart isn't his ability. He might have the best passing ability in this class, meaning strongest arm and things like that. He's accurate enough. His size is what you want to see in a pro quarterback. And his instincts are good. He continues to win and he gets better. His stats every year got better and better and better. As you look at them, you're like, this is a guy that's progressing and he's going in the right direction. He does run a 4.85. He has Tom Brady-esque speed. Which might not allow you to do some things that Mike Tomlin or others want to do outside the pocket in this new era NFL. But ultimately, neither will that be the case for a Will Howard or a Tyler Shuck or any of the other guys that are going to be behind him. I think it's still an overdraft if they do go quarterback here, but it's hard to knock that, right? That's the most important position on your team, and if you've got a 1 year, plug with Mason Rudolph, or at least an alternative where these guys could compete with one another for the starting job, maybe you could make that argument. But if they sign Aaron Rodgers is going to want assurances that he's going to have 2 years and they're not going to draft a quarterback, right? They're going to have to wait to 2026 to do that. And that's probably the smartest thing for them to do anyway. And that's why I think they ultimately end up at D-line or maybe corner.
Okay.
I have a comp that I want to ask about Jackson Dart, and I want your opinion on this. I was thinking about this over the last week or so. Jackson Dart reminds me a lot of Baker Mayfield. Do you like that comp, or do you not like that comp?
Well, he's bigger than Mayfield.
Very identical 40 times.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have the pedigree that Mayfield had leaving college and coming to the pros. He's also not played in a pro style offense, anywhere in his travels, whether it was, you put him at USC or West Virginia or Ole Miss or whatever. It's like the guy he's not done it. Right. So we have to wait to see if he can do it. And you can do it at a combine because it's basically a 7-on-7 drill and you're throwing in shorts and t-shirts. But what is it when you have to turn your back to the defense and you line up under center and all those kind of things that really hamstrung Justin Fields this year. I think a lot of folks that are Steeler fans were wondering why he didn't continue when he was 4-2, and ultimately it was because he was limited in his skill set. He had never played with his back to the defense. And when you're reading a defense and you need that extra second, you can't turn your back. So you play him in, shotgun, or you play him in pistol formation. So he's always looking at the defense and gets his best reads, where Russ came in and allowed them to do the play action pass, which was a better fit for Arthur Smith's offense and allowed him to do some things, that we couldn't do, which opened up the playbook, which made it more appealing to the Steelers as an organization, because he could play with his back to the defense. He had played at a Hall of Fame level with his back to the defense at times. And so, guys like Jackson Dart and guys, who was I just talking about? Oh, it's Justin Fields. They don't have that. And I'm wondering if Dart could step in and do that quickly. Is he the right guy? It's hard to say. Baker Mayfield, leadership, integrity. He's got that grit you want to see. Doesn't have the strongest of arms, but he's grown as a quarterback. He's now a really good starting quarterback. And that's something that Jackson, you're going to have to be patient. They weren't patient with Kenny, and when they moved it away, that's the thing. Are they going to be 2-3 years patient? I mean, look, Mayfield got really good at his third stop. Yep. Not in Cleveland and not in LA. Is when he got to Tampa, and then he had a prove it year, and then they gave him a big contract, and he followed that up. Like, he's now there. But it might take somebody like a Dart 4 or 5 years to get there, and I don't know if the Steeler faithful have that kind of patience.
They don't. definitely don't.
Oh, listen, this might be the most impatient fan base that I think I have seen in a very, very long time. It's literally like Kenny Pickett. It was literally, one bad pass. Yep, he's trash. Get him out of here. He's done. Mm-hmm. And what's funny is you can see, like, people will say that sarcastically. No, the Steeler fans actually mean that, which is because a lot of these fan base, and I'm a part of this demographic of a lot of us have only known Ben Roethlisberger as our quarterback. We've only known having a Hall of Fame 2-time Super Bowl champion quarterback under center. Yep. Now, Joe, on the other hand, he's been able to see other quarterbacks. I haven't before then.
No.
And Jared, the same way, and I know your dad too. He's
the dad's seen it before,
you can see it too. You can definitely tell who is a part of what demographic based on the way they talk about quarterbacks.
And if you want to correlate to what you're suggesting, there was that long break between Bradshaw and Roethlisberger, right? Mm-hmm. Bradshaw was a first overall guy. Roethlisberger was a top 10 guy. None of the Steelers quarterbacks in the middle ever came even close to that, right? Yep. And the best of that bunch may have been Neil O'Donnell, right? Neil O'Donnell got them to a Super Bowl, lost against a dynastic Dallas team at the time. There's no shame in that, and they almost pulled off the victory, even though Rod Woodson was coming back from a knee, and their best defensive player, wasn't in the best of shape. Still did pretty well and almost pulled off that win. O'Donnell, if you say his name in Pittsburgh, you get scowls, you get piff, you'll get people not like, and he took him to a Super Bowl. I mean, that's how spoiled this fan base is in that respect. I mean, if we don't make the playoffs in Pittsburgh, then something went wrong. We should be born into the playoffs. Just put us in the bracket, right? But you look at the strings of misses, the Cordell Stewarts, the players that they had holding down the fort in between, the Tommy Maddoxes. I mean, they were just all the same thing you see. And I see a lot of that in this year's quarterback prospect class. There isn't that guy. Even though Cam Ward might be at the top of the class, I think last year he might have gone 5th, 6th, or 7th overall, not overall, but as a quarterback out of the quarterback classes. Yep. So it's really, really hard to blame them if they took a shot at one of these guys. I'm not sure. And look, some of these guys, like you mentioned, Mayfield at the top of the segment, Mayfield might be, a perfect example of that. If you have patience, you have to be able to suffer a couple of losing seasons, if not more, to see a guy improve. And we just saw that with Sam Darnold. Yeah. Again, third team, you know what I mean? The guy bounces from the Jets down to Carolina, lands in Minnesota in the right system with the right coach, after he spent a few months out in San Francisco, and now he's a $30 million a year quarterback out in Seattle. I mean, the guy's come around, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes in this new era of the league, you've got to go out, and that's why I think they don't want to chase a quarterback in this draft. I think that's why they've put all their money in the basket of Aaron Rodgers. They want a veteran. They want someone who's not going to lose them games. Tomlin doesn't want to suffer that. The fan base doesn't want to suffer that. And so Aaron Rodgers will eke them into the playoffs this year.
Here's a conversation I want to have real quick about this whole Aaron Rodgers thing. And you mentioned it earlier about George Pickens. And I know there's been the conversation about whether the Steelers should trade George Pickens or not. He has 1 year left on his deal. Try and get something for him now. But here's my rebuttal to that. You just traded and paid DK Metcalf a crap ton of money. You were just in this situation last year where you had a great wide receiver one, and then you go down about 13 steps before you get to your wide receiver two.
Yep.
In my opinion, why would you want to do that? I understand that unless you plan on getting a wide receiver with that second round pick that you're going to get, I just don't see the purpose of it. People say, "Oh, because you're not going to get anything for him." Okay, but my thing is, you're good if you're getting Aaron Rodgers. I think he's the guy that I'd want to have when you have multiple mouths to feed. Now,
I'll give you 3 reasons why.
Okay.
The first is he's a locker room cancer. He hasn't gotten any better, and the team, the fan base, he's disaffected everybody, including coaches. And I think that the Steeler way is to eventually find an off ramp for these guys as part of that. Secondly, DK Metcalf, right? And this is 1A and 1B. They paid him all that money, which means when George is up for a contract next year, they're not going to pay him that money. And as a result, he's going to go somewhere, anywhere, and you're not going to get anything for him except for a back end, compensatory pick in round 3, a year after the fact. So you've got to do something with it. You're going to have to pay him like Cincinnati did. And then you've got 2 receivers making bank. And that's not what the Steelers want to do. So it makes sense for you to move him in a year where you've already paid the guy you see as your long-term future. You get a cancer out of the locker room, and you don't have to worry about paying him next year when you lose him for nothing when he becomes an unrestricted free agent in year 4 after this coming season. And thirdly, and people don't talk about this, but Metcalf and Pickens play the same position. They're an X receiver. I mean, when was the last time you saw George Pickens in the middle of the field? Right? That's not what he does, right? They both run down the length of the field. Sometimes they do square ins. They'll do outs, flags, and posts, and that's what they do. They're both X receivers. Neither play Z, neither play slot, right? So if you've got a guy that is playing the same position, how do you design an offense for 2 X receivers? I don't think I don't. Yeah. So like you don't want to. I mean, sure, the vertical game would be great, and Rodgers is accurate as they come, maybe the most accurate in NFL history. But ultimately, you've got something there that you've got to address. You've got 2 guys playing the same position, and so I think that's why. Even though if you say, "Look, we'll suffer his cancer because he is so good," and you know what, you're right. We've got him and DK on the same team, and Rodgers could throw to them, and that's an appealing thing for us, the fans, and for Rodgers to get him in the door. But at the end, they have to figure out a way to address what I think is the obvious elephant in the room: is that you got a guy that plays the same. Not all wide receivers are the same, and that's where I think that really makes a logistical nightmare for an Arthur Smith. Is like, all right, which one of these guys is playing that position right now, or can we train the other to be a Z? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. We'll see.
So then, because then my question to that is, how do they feel about Roman Wilson? Because Roman Wilson, I get he didn't play it all last year, but he has to be a big part of this conversation too, because you used the 3rd round pick on him, and I think he's the guy that would be a very good slot receiver. I think he's the guy, the perfect kind of slot receiver. So then what would you do at the wide receiver 2 position? Because and I think that's a big thing. Now, I know the Steelers have had the history of getting receivers later in the draft. That will be something, but that's just kind of my thing is, what are you going to do with that wide receiver 2? Because that's the other thing too, is part of the reason why things went to hell last year was when George Pickens was out and your wide receiver 1 had to be Van Jefferson. It's like, oh boy, ain't no one scared of nothing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my thing is I want to grow this wide receiver room as best as we can to where if something were to happen, we're not thinking, crap, here we go.
So yeah, I'll throw out a scenario for you and you
Okay.
tell me how far off I am. There's a few names we haven't talked about yet. Let's assume that Pickens goes on and moves on. You mentioned Roman Wilson. Roman Wilson's a natural slot receiver. He was injured last year several times and just couldn't make it into the starting lineup. So we haven't seen him. We haven't seen their first round draft pick from last year either. He blew out his knee and training camp, and we'll see if he can anchor the right side of the line this year when they kick Jones over to the left. But they're still at 21. They could trade back and maybe grab Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State, who could play all three positions and play them well. They could sign Alan Lazard, who the Jets are waiting on bated breath to release. He has an $11 million 1 year deal still left on his contract, and he's somebody that the Steelers, if they get
I thought they just did something with his contract today. I thought he took a pay cut.
Yeah, I think from what I was told, maybe you're right. Maybe I missed it in the last couple of days, but ultimately I got the sense
it was actually today. The Jets and wide receiver Alan Lazard reached an agreement on a restructured contract.
Well, there you go. Well, then that's off the table. But I still think that you could find an opportunity to fill that void with an Egbuka or somebody, and then you miss on the corner and or the defensive interior lineman, and you get them in the second and third round as part of that, especially if you move on from Pickens and you get a first or second round for him. It depends on what they get in return for him.
Okay.
It's going to be interesting to see. It's just I have that. And if you do trade back, I do. And something that you mentioned earlier, and I'm watching the time. I know you got to go here in a minute. One thing that I noticed you mentioned earlier, and I'm curious about was because I know the conversation has been if you trade back, then that I think the Derek Harmon conversation, but it seems like you think he might go a little bit higher than people think.
Yeah, I think Harmon is, he's a 5-tool player as a defensive interior lineman. I mean, he's incredibly gifted. He could play everything from nose to 5 technique. And if you could move a guy around like that and still put as many pressures on the quarterback as he's done over the last 2 years, I mean, that's just ridiculous. I think that he's if there's an apple in the eye of the Steelers, I would think it's Derek Harmon, just based on Mike Tomlin's mantra of positional flexibility, where Nolan's going to be limited in that capacity, or Kenneth Grant's going to really be a zero technique, and that's what you're going to use him as, or 2-down guy, at least in the beginning, sort of similar to what Philly's done with Davis, and let him kind of grow into a multifaceted player. Where I think Harmon's someone that can go right away and play in any of those positions.
I got one last thing for you: the running backs. For the Steelers in the mid rounds, anyone you like the Steelers would go after?
Yeah, I think the Steelers have shown that they like Caleb Johnson out of Iowa, and that's that'll be a day 2 guy, and or Bashal Tutin from Virginia Tech. They had him in for a top 30 interview. Tutin is like Maurice Jones-Drew with like 4.3 speed. I mean, he is a bowling ball, hard to tackle, and has breakaway speed, and he's fun to watch. He's just played on a very poor Virginia Tech team, and that's limited him. But if you watch him in combines, you watch him on film, you watch him in a bunch of places, I think that's a guy that could also step in and start. Now, getting to Jeff's point earlier, if they step in right away and just fill that with Omarion Hampton, if he's around at 21, that might be the best of all worlds, because he is fast, he is strong, he could be a 3-down guy. Then you can use Warren and you can use Gainwell as your as your situational players and bring them in for pass pro, bring them in for passing downs. Even though Hampton can do it, you can give him a break, and that's really what Gainwell specializes in, what Warren excels in. Doing, you don't want to do, you do more with less with him. 10 carries a game, 12 carries a game, and you'll get a lot of productivity out of him. If you make him your featured back, you're not going to get that.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. But hey, Joe, I know you got to go. I know you're a busy man. Thank you so much for joining us. And
pleasure. Thanks for having me again.
I will see you in 2 weeks. And again, make sure to check out all the content on draftnation.com, and make sure to go and get your tickets to the Draft Nation draft show at the Rivers Casino in Pittsburgh. Joe, again, thank you so much for joining us.
See you guys.
See ya.
All right. So Joe, he has to go. So we're going to continue this conversation here for a little bit, because interesting conversation, especially about the whole wide receiver situation, because that was my biggest thing with when it came to the wide receivers. Were what are you going to do? Because I don't want to see that same situation happen this year like we did last year, especially if you let go of George Pickens. But then my question is, I don't know if I necessarily want to sacrifice giving. If you trade away George Pickens, you're getting rid, or you're not going to be able to get a quality corner or a defensive tackle. And I don't know if I want to get to that point.
I agree. I think depends what, like you said, depends on what they offer, hopefully you're hoping the second round pick, maybe we'll see, depending. Like I said, we have to basically talk about get in like a Mega Ibuka to replace him in the draft if we can get, if he's there. It's just I just don't know. I understand they both play the same position. I thought about it too. It's like, yeah, they're both kind of the same player. Bigs on the outside. It's very hard to work around that. In that type of offense. But is it worth? Like I said, is it worth the 1 year with both of them together? See what happens, and then he walks out. It's a tough.
Yeah, it's a tough conversation. And then, like I mentioned earlier, it's how do you feel about Roman Wilson? Because I think Roman Wilson, if you truly believe that and I'm not talking, we're talking different positions here in terms of the different kind of receivers. But if you have a thing to, and I know Calvin Austin's got, he's got to be involved in this conversation as well. But I just think with the wide receivers right now, it's a conversation that really has to be had. And
like, do you throw George Pickens in the slot this year? See how he works. Do you throw? Like I say,
I don't think his skill set. I don't think the skill set's there. I don't think he's the route runner that you need to be a slot receiver.
Yeah, you throw him so like the slot, the other whatever. They got to figure it out. I don't know what they're gonna do, but they just gotta. It's a lot of questions.
It's definitely going to be interesting to see. So what did you take out of everything that we talked about over the last hour with Joe? What did you take?
What I was really worried about is the quarterback situation. What's going to happen with? I know it's still early. It could be all smoke screen. We still got 2 weeks left before the draft. They met with Shedeur Sanders today. There's another. I think to talk about Kyle McCord. There's another visit coming. I don't scheduled, but. If Shedeur falls, the Steelers would take him at 21, which I don't think he's going to fall personally, but it's just there's a chance he might, which I'm glad he answered it. It makes me feel a little more confident the Steelers will go with, a defensive lineman or a corner in the first round, whatever, best available besides a quarterback. And they still could possibly draft a quarterback in the mid rounds, but I just still doubt it. Maybe the one thing I should have asked him was Jalen Milroe. You got a draft invite in person. In Green Bay. I know it doesn't mean much, but I was surprised he
look at
me
Mike Willis a couple years ago.
That's one of them too. But it's just
I think the conversation about Jalen Milroe is the conversation at 33 with the Browns, because it seems like that conversation has been going crazy around here. And oh boy, do I hope it happens.
So I say Miller will be the second round pick, basically. Second pick of the second round. 33. Or first pick of the second.
Yeah.
But I know what you're saying. That'd be insane, because the Browns don't look like they're taking a quarterback at pick 2. It's between Hunter and Carter. Probably through the whole way.
Yeah, I think that Hunter's going to end up being the pick, and then they're going to go with probably Jalen Milroe at 33. But at the same time, I don't want that to happen, because I want them to have to start Kenny Pickett.
Have to start. Or they still have Deshaun Watson.
He's not going to be able to play this year. He retore his Achilles.
Oh, I know he retore it.
Yeah, he retore. That was back in January. That came out that he retore his Achilles. So he had to get surgery and get all that healed up again. So, yeah, he's probably not playing this year.
Wow. Play Kenny Pickett. But yeah, that was my one thing that Joe answered, which I was, made me feel more comfortable, was the quarterback situation and the running backs. I was just curious to see what names the Steelers are interested in, what running backs. I know Omarion Hampton had a visit. He talked about the guy from Virginia Tech and from I forgot the other one, Iowa, which is cool. I would prefer Jalen Warren not to be the running back one. If not, he's not. I don't know. He can't be a 3-down back, but like he's better on pass protection, a lot more like situational downs.
Right.
So I just don't don't want to use him all those snaps like all on him. Maybe you could wear him down. He's not a 3-down back. He could be, but I don't know how effective would be.
Yeah. And the one thing too that he had mentioned about Omarion Hampton was he reminds me a lot of Dalvin Cook. He's a 6 foot, 221 pound running back who he's a 2-time first team all ACC. And he mentioned it, and I agree 1,000% on. He's a definitely a 3-down back because he's a quality pass catcher. He's a willing blocker, which you like to see as well. Very physical. He's more of that north-south kind of runner. He's not necessarily east and west. I'm gonna make a couple cuts on you. He's not that kind of receiver. He's a bruising, run down north and south kind of running back. So I think and let's be honest, that sounds kind of like something that Mike Tomlin would want.
Yep, I agree. Totally agree. But I'm it's just 2 weeks away. I can't wait for this to be done. I just cannot wait for this to be done. And then whatever this saga with Aaron Rodgers ends, which I hope it ends, God knows soon. Everyone was hoping that they would announce last night, which I knew it wasn't going to happen.
Just to see everyone be tortured, I hope this goes into like May or June.
Oh my gosh, that'd be bad.
I just like to see the torture on people.
And then there's the one thing we didn't talk about.
Okay.
One thing they didn't talk about is everyone overreacted about. I'm sure you saw. Everyone talked about it.
I did not say anything last night about it, and I'm going to say something right now.
Mm-hmm.
I should clip this and then post this out on Twitter.
Go for it.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, please, for the love of God, why do we overreact like effing children to cryptic tweets from athletes? You guys act like it's the end of the goddamn world anytime someone posts anything. You go, oh my god, we gotta start acting like we're FBI agents. Oh my god, what is he talking about? Could it be this? Could it be this? Could it be this? No, shut the hell up, you guys. Oh my god, this drives me up on every wall.
And for people that don't know,
something happened. Stop overreacting. You guys, you know what? Oh, I'm about to go down a rabbit hole. You guys are going to go down a rabbit hole.
Before you go down, hold on. For the people that don't know, Mr. TJ Watt posted a picture on Instagram on his story with him doing a peace out sign that people were over analyzing about. People were talking about he's on his 1 year deal left on his contract. And just so everyone realizes, TJ Watt did not, correct me if I'm wrong, that extension did not happen until training camp.
That did not happen until, I want to say, the end of August or September.
So let's calm down. There's still time. They will get a deal done. End of August till September when they got a new deal. So let's calm down. There's still time. I'm sure TJ wants to get it done and over. Maybe that's what he's, showing. But I understand. And then there's people wanting to trade TJ Watt, which I think you're out of your mind, kind of. Which is like no, thank you. Just because he's on his 1 year of his deal and he's approaching he's 30 years old. Still probably the top 2 or the best pass rusher in the league. Like, I think people just need to take a chill pill. The floor is yours, Kirby. I know I didn't want to let the people know that was the reason that you were going down that rabbit hole.
So yeah. I go on. I'm on X. I'm on break. I'm at work and I'm on break. And before I saw the picture, like, the fuck is everyone talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Then I see the picture. I'm like, okay. My immediate reaction was, here we go. And then it just keeps on going. And it keeps on going. And it keeps on going. And it's just, oh my God, are we going to trade TJ? Is TJ retiring? What's going to happen? Oh my God. What does this mean? We have to figure this out right now. I have to stop my life right now and figure out what's going on with Trent Jordan-Watt with the Steelers. People talk about how they have anxiety. No, you give your own self anxiety because you go through 19,872 different scenarios in your head of shit that don't matter.
On April 10th, 2025.
Holy shit.
We're not in training camp. Like I said,
we're not even past the draft. We're not at mandatory minicamp. We're not even at voluntary minicamp, which I can't wait. I cannot wait at this rate until we see if TJ Watt doesn't go to a voluntary minicamp and everyone starts blowing up again. Holy shit. Oh, great. We have Herb here. It says, that's me on a daily basis with everything, LOL. Herb, I'm about to be your therapist for 2 seconds. Stop that.
Let's calm down. It's okay. Like I said earlier, they didn't figure out a deal till the end of August, September almost, and we were fine.
Oh man,
I think the price of the extension that TJ Watt has gone up a little more. I think maybe he's a little upset. Maybe he's up the price. That's the only thing I could think of, but. I don't think he's going to get that Myles Garrett contract money he wants.
Well, no, that was just a desperation move by
Cleveland, but he's probably going to get somewhere maybe close to it. I don't know how close, but it's like I said, it's April 10th. We haven't gone through the draft. We haven't gone through voluntary minicamps. Let's calm down. You're all freaking about still if Aaron Rodgers is still trying to come to the team right now, and now you're adding TJ Watt into the mix. Let's calm down.
We're still in the first trimester of the month.
Yeah, it is still April. Like I said, not even the summer.
We have 2 weeks until the draft. Let's worry about that first.
Yeah, can I worry about the draft? That's what I'm worried about more.
I'm worried about who we're going to get at 21.
Exactly, and I'm glad that. Listen, if Shedeur falls, that's the one thing a little way. If he falls, like the Steelers are tempted to take him if he's there, but I don't think he's going to be there. I'm hoping he's not there. Personally,
I'm not worried about it. I'll say this right now: I have zero worry about whether he's a Steeler or not. Because
if he's there at 21, you don't think they take him if he's there?
If he's there at 21, I don't think you. I think he will still be there at 22.
Okay, well, that's all I need to hear.
Yeah, and Herb, I'll let you answer that too. I'm one of those people that I don't.
Nobody believes in this quarterback class. Nobody. You shouldn't.
For a good reason.
And I talked about it the last time we were on here. Next year, if Steelers want to get a quarterback, is next year. It's definitely next year. That we got the draft capital for next year.
Do it when we're there.
Yeah, in the city of Pittsburgh. That is very true. That is also another scenario. It is in Pittsburgh next year, which is a lot of people will be there.
I don't think he's there at 21, but yeah, if he is, he'll be there at 22. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what goes on with him. But for the most part, I think that's about it that I have for this week, unless you have anything that you want to get off your chest or
Nope. I think he hit everything we got. We talked about the defensive lineman at 21. I think that's going to be the position on draft night as of now. I think that's what's going to happen. Either Kenneth Grant or Derek Harmon. Maybe Walter Nolan if he's there, but I doubt it. I don't know. I think Kenneth Grant is what I want mostly, or Derek Harmon I'm happy with if it's the defensive line.
it's gonna be interesting to see what happens with it's gonna be interesting to see what happens in 2 weeks' time. But I want to say this is probably gonna be it for this episode. I do want to say thank you everyone for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you're on Facebook, what's up? If you're on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're on X, make sure to go and follow both of us. I'm at Jeff_Kirby412. He is at Boss_Sanchez98. Next week, same time, mock draft time. Mock draft 2.0 show, but it'll be my 3.0. And it's going to be fun. We're going to, as we always do, talk about what picks we think are going to happen. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be a good time. Herb is definitely going to be on there. I'm still waiting on Hunter because there were some scheduling issues because of the timing of things, just because of the time of the show. And that's on me because, my work schedule got all out of whack. But
Hopefully I'm good next week. I should be, but never know. Should be okay.
Well, if not, you're fired.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. But no. Yeah, next week, mock draft showtime is going to be a blast. It's going to be fun. But until then, hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe. Have fun. And until then, peace out. And by the way, we're number one. We're number one. Number one in the East, baby. Number one in the East.
Congrats. You want a participation trophy?
Oh, we'll be winning more than participation trophies.
Okay. All right. Sure. All righty.
All the way to the championship while you guys are sitting in 7th place.
Yeah.
Ew.
That's
Only
right.
40 wins? We had that months ago.
Great.
We had 40 wins. We had 40 wins a long time ago. We had that back during snow time.
Hey, man.
We had that back in February.
Oh, wow. Great. Wait, I'm just waiting for the playoffs to start, man.
We
That's all I want.
We won our 40th game February 2nd.
Congrats.
And then the Warriors, shout out to Harrison Barnes. Shout out to Harrison Barnes. I appreciate him. Till then, hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe. Have fun. Until then, peace out.